The Secretary reaffirmed the United States' ironclad support for Israel's security. Again, Israel has accepted the bridging proposal. Now Hamas must do the same.
Over 100 innocent hostages remain captured by Hamas in Gaza. Time is running out for them as they remain in captivity, subject to unimaginable horror.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Coordinator Winsland and Dr. Baxter, for your briefings. Colleagues, Secretary Blinken just concluded his 9th visit to the region since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th and unleashed a war that has caused so much suffering and devastation. The Secretary reaffirmed the United States' ironclad support for Israel's security, but he also aimed to advance discussions on a comprehensive ceasefire and hostage release deal that now is in sight, and to emphasize that no one in the region should take any action that would undermine ongoing negotiations. While the Secretary was in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed that Israel accepts the bridging proposal that the United States, Qatar, and Egypt put forward last week. The proposal is consistent with the principles outlined by President Biden in May 2024, and that this Council endorsed in Resolution 2735. And this builds on areas of agreement from talks convened in Doha last week and bridges the remaining gaps in a manner that allows for a swift implementation of the deal. We appreciate this Council's support for the efforts the United States, Qatar, and Egypt have made to help get this deal done. We now have a path forward to save lives, bring relief to the people of Gaza, get the hostages back home, and de-escalate regional tensions. Again, Israel has accepted the bridging proposal. Now Hamas must do the same. As members of this Council, we must speak with one voice, and we must use our leverage to press Hamas to accept the bridging proposal, which includes massive and immediate benefits for the Palestinians in Gaza and incorporates a number of Hamas's earlier demands. Colleagues, this is a decisive moment. It's a decisive moment for ceasefire talks and for the region. And so every member of this Council should continue to send strong messages to other actors in the region to avoid actions that would move us away from finalizing this deal. At the same time, the United Nations and humanitarian agencies need to accelerate planning so that they can surge assistance into Gaza in the event of a ceasefire, while we all continue to press for increased humanitarian assistance now. We continue to work with the Israeli authorities to speed up clearances and remove restrictions so that Palestinian civilians can get much-needed food, medicine, shelter, clean water, and other essentials, including vaccines, as we just heard from Dr. Baxter. A disease like polio must be prevented from making a comeback in Gaza, and we urge Israel to continue working with humanitarian agencies to provide polio vaccinations for Palestinian civilians, particularly children in Gaza. This effort is urgent, and having a ceasefire deal will greatly facilitate the implementation of this crucial vaccination campaign. Colleagues, even as we press for a ceasefire and hostage releases in Gaza, we must also continue to speak out about the situation in the West Bank. I want to be clear. Actions in the West Bank that could escalate tensions at this fragile moment must stop. As the White House has made clear, attacks by violent settlers against Palestinian civilians in the West Bank are unacceptable and must stop. Israeli authorities must take measures to protect these communities from harm, including by intervening to stop such violence and by holding all perpetrators to account. It is also critical that Israel release all owed Palestinian Authority tax revenues on time. These funds are needed to pay PA salaries, provide essential services, ensure peace, security, and stability in the West Bank, all of which are key to Israel's security interests. Additionally, we remain concerned about Israel's West Bank settlement announcements and the legalization of outposts. The government of Israel's resettlement program is inconsistent with international law, and these unilateral actions are detrimental to the prospects of a two-state solution, which we have repeatedly said offers the only durable and secure path forward for Israelis and Palestinians. The suicide bombing in Tel Aviv on August 18th, which Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad claimed, was a stark reminder of Israel's very real security concerns. The United States unequivocally condemns this attack, as it does all acts of terrorism, and calls on the Security Council to do the same. Colleagues, this week I spoke with two individuals whose family members were murdered in cold blood by Hamas on October 7th. Irish Weinstein Hage, who lost both of her parents, and Judy and Gadi on that horrific day. And Ruby Chin, whose son Ite, a 19-year-old Israeli-American who was killed by Hamas. It is beyond heartbreaking and infuriating that the remains of Iris's and Ruby's loved ones are still being held by Hamas, as they have held the body of Hadara Golden since 2014, denying his family closure. Today, we again call on Hamas to release the remains of Judy, Gadi, Ite, Hartar, and all those still in Gaza immediately. And here's what's truly remarkable to me. Iris and Ruby have turned their immense pain into purpose by organizing and speaking out and lobbying for an agreement on a ceasefire and the release of hostages. During our call, Ruby invoked some of Martin Luther King's most powerful words. He reminded me of a quote, and I'll quote it here: "The fierce urgency of now." To me, that perfectly sums up the moment we find ourselves in and the task before us, as we also just heard from Special Coordinator Winsland. It is urgent. It is urgent that we secure a ceasefire and a hostage deal now. Not soon, but now, because families like Iris's and Ruby's desperately need closure, because the well-being of all hostages is in jeopardy, because Palestinians in Gaza are living under hellish conditions and are caught in the crosshairs of war, because there's very real danger of regional escalation. And so let us do everything in our power to get this ceasefire and hostage release deal over the finish line now. Let us be confronted with the fierce urgency of now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, President. And I thank Special Coordinator Wennesland and Dr. Baxter of Save the Children for their briefings and for the tireless work of their teams. Gaza has become the deadliest place in the world to be a child. Women and children continue to bear the brunt of this brutal conflict that since October 7 has killed over 40,000 people. Children account for nearly a third of identified casualties. We call on Israel to take all possible steps to avoid civilian casualties. Over 100 innocent hostages remain captured by Hamas in Gaza. Time is running out for them as they remain in captivity, subject to unimaginable horror. We call again for their immediate and unconditional release. President, we've heard today that Gaza is on the brink of a devastating polio outbreak, another deadly threat to a people already facing a multitude of deadly threats, ongoing bombardment, risk of famine, and dire sanitary conditions. Meanwhile, regional tensions remain high. Any attack by Iran would have devastating consequences. Urgent action is needed on 3 fronts. First, we need an immediate ceasefire. All sides need to focus on the negotiations led by the US, Egypt, and Qatar. These talks offer a vital opportunity to secure an immediate ceasefire that ends the conflict, gets the hostages out, allows urgent access to aid, and de-escalates regional tensions. We also urge Iran, Lebanese Hezbollah, and other Iranian-aligned militia groups to stand down the ongoing threats of military escalation against Israel. All parties need to exercise restraint, as my Prime Minister has made clear in recent weeks. Second, Gaza stands on the precipice of a polio outbreak, with over 640,000 children under the age of 10 in need of vaccinations. We call on the parties to continue cooperating with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and partners to facilitate vaccine rollouts. Israel needs to allow safe and unhindered aid access into and across Gaza, and to put in place an effective deconfliction mechanism to ensure aid and vaccines can be delivered and administered safely. Israel's ramping up of new evacuation orders is causing chaos in Gaza. The humanitarian zone, now just covering 11% of Gaza, is chronically overcrowded, with people desperately seeking shelter. It is not safe, and it is still receiving fire. British NGO UK Med reports that just last night, their residential compound in the humanitarian zone was damaged by Israeli shelling. Humanitarian actors are being forced to evacuate their offices and abandon warehouses full of aid. If this does not stop, a polio vaccine rollout may become impossible. All parties must comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law. Third, President, settler violence in the West Bank is inexcusable. The violence in the Palestinian village of Jit last week was abhorrent. We call on Israel to take action against these extremists. The UK has sanctioned 8 individuals and 2 entities related to settler violence. We condemn the continued expansion of settlements in the West Bank. It is a clear violation of international law. Finally, President, my Foreign Secretary and French Foreign Minister Séjourné visited Israel and the OPTs last week. They conveyed 3 key messages: that the current ceasefire talks were the only way to avert a full regional crisis, that the humanitarian situation was catastrophic and we needed to see immediate improvements, and that there had to be accountability for the appalling settler violence in the West Bank. I hope that we can all unite around these 3 messages today. Thank you.